Some buildings are more than just places. They're stories. They're living, breathing documents written not in ink, but in stone and tile and plaster. And today, we're going to read one of the greatest stories ever built, the Jameh Mosque of Isfahan. Just look at this place. It feels ancient, right? And it is. For 1,200 years, this spot has been constantly changing, getting renovated, rebuilt, and expanded by one dynasty after another. Each empire that came through left its own chapter, turning this mosque into one of the most complex, amazing stories ever told in architecture. So that's the real question, isn't it? How on earth do you read a story that's told in domes and arches instead of paragraphs and sentences? Well, you kind of have to become an architectural detective. You have to peel back the layers one by one. And that's exactly what we're about to do. Okay, so let's start with the most obvious layer, the building itself. You can really think of the Jama Mosque as a museum of architecture because it has pieces from just about every major period in Iranian history, all in one place. I mean, just stop and think about that number for a second. 1,200 years. This isn't some building that was built and then just frozen in time. Nope. It's been growing and changing right along with the city around it for over a millennium. It's just an incredible stretch of living history. And this timeline really shows you how it all went down. It started out super simple in the 8th century, just a basic mud brick layout. But then, fast forward to the 11th century, and the powerful Seljuk dynasty comes in and gives it this massive upgrade. We're talking grand domes, huge vaulted halls. Then the Ilkhanids added their own beautiful prayer niche, and finally, in the 16th century, the Safavids came along and didn't just redecorate, they completely remade the mosque's entire identity. And you can literally see that growth right here. Take a look at that plan on the left. That's the core of the mosque back in the Seljuk era. Pretty organized, symmetrical. Now look at the one on the right. That's the mosque today. It's this massive, sprawling complex. You can see how it grew over hundreds of years, with new halls and courtyards just tacked on, almost like the rings of a tree. But this wasn't just about getting bigger for the sake of it. It was about a totally revolutionary new design. In fact, you could call it a courtyard revolution. This place became the blueprint for a style that would change Islamic architecture forever. All right, so to get what I'm talking about, you need to know this one word, iwan. An iwan is basically a big vaulted hall that's open on one side, usually facing a courtyard. Just picture that shape in your head because it is the key to everything that comes next. And this right here is where the magic happened. See, before this mosque, that four-iwan layout with those huge open halls around a courtyard was something you'd only see in the palaces of old Sassanid emperors. It was a symbol of royal power. So what the architects did here was totally radical. They were the first to ever take that imperial design and use it for a house of worship. It was this mind-blowing fusion of earthly power and sacred space. But the big ideas didn't just stop at the floor plan. Nope. They were also pushing the limits of what was possible with engineering, looking up towards the sky. They were innovating with domes, like this one here. This is the Nizam al-Mulk dome, and it's thought to be the very first double-shelled ribbed dome ever built. Now, that design wasn't just gorgeous to look at, it was also way stronger, which meant they could build bigger and more spectacular spaces underneath. It was a huge leap forward. And the impact was enormous. That four-iwan plan and the double-shelled dome became the gold standard. It was the prototype that builders copied for mosques all across Central Asia. This building didn't just stand there and watch history happen. It actually shaped it. But believe it or not, all of this amazing architecture is really just the stage for an even deeper story, a story about power and faith and politics, and it's hidden in plain sight, right there in the walls. Because remember, this place was constantly being changed, and the biggest, most important changes weren't just about adding a new room or some new tilework, they were about changing the very soul of the building itself. So to get this, we just need a tiny bit of context. The mosque was originally built by Sunni rulers, who revere the first four caliphs as the Prophet Muhammad's rightful successors. But later on, it was taken over and transformed by Shia rulers, who believed that authority passed down through the Prophet's family to a line of 12 imams. And here's the major turning point. During the reign of the super powerful Safavid dynasty, a huge effort was made to turn this famous Sunni landmark into a massive billboard for Shia Islam. So how do you actually change the identity of a building that's already hundreds of years old. You use words, you add new inscriptions with these incredibly powerful, poetic titles for Imam Ali, who is the key figure in Shia Islam after the Prophet himself. Titles just like these, Sword of Allah, Lion of Allah, were carved right into the walls, basically rebranding the whole space. And you can see exactly what they did right here on these walls. All of these incredibly detailed tile panels, filled with calligraphy naming the 12 imams, were added all over the mosque. You could almost say the walls themselves were used in an ideological battle. The Safavids knew that if they could rewrite the sacred texts on the building, they could change its meaning for every single person who walked inside. They were literally claiming this piece of history for themselves. So, when you put it all together, the architecture, the engineering, the political text, you realize this mosque isn't just a building, it's kind of like a blueprint for understanding history itself. So what's the big takeaway? Well, the Jamia Mosque is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, yes. It's a game-changing architectural model, it's a living museum of Islamic art, but maybe most importantly, it's a physical document that lets us read one of the biggest religious and political shifts in the history of Persia. In the end, maybe the best way to think about the mosque is as a giant mirror. It perfectly reflects the ambitions of empires, the genius of artists, and the deep currents of faith that have shaped this part of the world for more than 1,000 years. And it leaves you with this one last thought. The greatest buildings do so much more than just give us shelter. They're storytellers. They hold on to the beliefs, the conflicts, and the triumphs of the past, reminding us that architecture doesn't just house us, it tells us who we were.